Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany, and today my group will be sharing on the topic of role-playing games. In my group, we have Qi-En, Jiaxuan, Javier, and Garrett. To start off, I will be explaining on what is role-playing game. It is a genre of a video game where a gamer is able to control a fictional character that takes up a quest in an imaginary world. Now, I'll be starting off the presentation by explaining on how role-playing game is a pop culture. Firstly, I'll be talking about mass production and consumptions. There are more than 1,000 different types of role-playing games invented in today's world. Some examples of role-playing games include MapleStory and Pokemon Go. On average, one person takes about 7 hours to play role-playing game each week. In the survey that we have conducted, there is 88% of people that plays role-playing games. In today's world, role-playing game is very popular among youths and adults. One example to show the contribution of mass marketing is for Pokemon Go. There is an ability to buy virtual goods, which brings about an estimated amount of $1.6 million per day, while for mass media, they are able to portray through advertisements such as Instagram and Facebook that they can broadcast their role-playing games to a larger audience, such as the people who love playing role-playing games, and this will allow to promote their brands. Moving on, we'll be discussing on mass appeal. We have interviewed 50 people in Singapore, and out of the 50 people, 70% are males, while 30% are females. Moving on to the age group, there is 30% that is under 18 years old, 62% that is between 18 to 49 years old, and 8% that is above 50 years old. While for the type of role-playing games that they play, majority says that they play Pokemon Go as they have not heard about games such as RuneScape and World of Warcraft before. From this statistic, our group can conclude that no matter the age or gender, that there are different people that still plays role-playing games. Hence, this will influence more people to play role-playing games, allowing to gain more popularity for this. Our group has decided to narrow this down into 3 countries that we have chosen: Japan, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. The reason behind why we have decided to choose these 3 countries is because that there is an increasing popularity of the role-playing games in the selected countries, and this country shows the best example to elaborate more on the development of role-playing games.
In Japan, between 1982 to 1986 was the birth of many role-playing games. Some of the earliest developed and released role-playing games in Japan, which is quite famous, are The Legend of Zelda and Pokemon Red and Blue. These games are also published locally by Nintendo, a Japanese multinational video game company headquartered in Kyoto, Japan. The diffusion of role-playing games in Japan is expansion diffusion. The reason why this is expansion diffusion is because of the success and spread of these role-playing games in different parts of the world, such as in New York for Comic-Con with The Legend of Zelda fans, and crowds of locals playing Pokemon Go in Perth on the bottom of the screen. While still remaining strong in Japan, as we can see from the top left picture, where everyone in Tokyo was proud and celebrating the release of Pokemon Go in Japan, wearing Pikachu mascot and merchandise. There is an integration of culture in the development of role-playing games in Japan. One example is that in 2014, Nintendo collaborated with Niantic, an American software company, leading to creation of an app called Google Maps Pokemon Challenge. Through shared ideas, integration, and testing, has led to the idea of capturing of Pokemons through the real-world time and geographically via a smartphone, sparking the creation of a new augmented reality role-playing mobile game. We will now narrow down to one of the most trending role-playing game in Japan and the rest of the world. Firstly, from the statistics alone, there are no conclusive evidence of one gender being the majority of the players. Rather, Pokemon Go is a game with an almost evenly mixed gender based on the data of the daily logs in, which are 47.3 female and 52.7 male, last data in October 2020. Secondly, Pokemon Go, an augmented reality role-playing game, has a low average daily playing time. It is surprisingly low for a popular game averaging 33 minutes a day. Thirdly, Pokemon Go lacks an in-game community for the players to reach out to one another, although there may be third-party media such as Facebook. On the bottom of the iceberg, firstly, Pokemon Go has done a good job in this case. The game itself is not biased to one gender alone, which is still a problem in Japan itself, as it still faces problems of gender inequality. Secondly, the reality is that Japanese work culture has one of the worst work-life balance. It is difficult for them to play any other video games that require consistent hard work, time, and effort. Pokemon Go comes in and fits in the picture perfectly, as it depends on the person's luck to capture the Pokemon. Thirdly, Pokemon Go is actually a solo game. There are no in-game chat functions or an in-game community such as guilds. Each player are on their own, which promotes the idea of individual progression.
In the United Kingdom, UK, the earliest locally developed role-play game short form RPG was Multi-User Dungeon MUD, created by Richard Barrow and Roy Trubshaw in 1978, for which they are students at the University of Essex. Barrow was a fan of Dungeons and Dragons from America, which was launched in 1974, which is the origins of role-play games in the UK. Some other RPGs in the UK was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and RuneScape. The diffusion of role-playing games RPG in the UK is stimulus diffusion, as games like Multi-User Dungeon MUD are text-based role-playing games inspired by Dungeons and Dragons from America, a fantasy tabletop RPG, and RuneScape, a MMORPG inspired by the classic LucasArts comedy adventures like Monkey Island and Day of Tentacles from America. Though they come from America as comedy adventures or fantasy tabletop RPGs, there was a change of genre to the UK RPG from the original American RPG. With advances in home computing, RPGs increased in popularity, leading to integration acculturation because there's a constant improvement with people exposed to different types of RPGs. This led to different methods and ways to play RPGs, from the pen and paper role-playing games called tabletop RPG to text-based role-playing games played on computers. Now, RPGs can be played through various devices like phones to Xbox. Multi-User Dungeon MUD also influenced most graphical multiplayer online games like EverQuest and World of Warcraft, creating new games with different variations and improving the RPG market. Moving on, I'll be talking about RuneScape and what is on top of the iceberg. Firstly, through research, the RuneScape community is composed of 84% male and 16% female players, which means it is a game that is dominated by the male gender. Secondly, RuneScape is a fantasy massively multiplayer online role-playing game MMORPG that has a high average daily playing time. This is shown for which most RuneScape players play about 2 to 5 hours a day, with at least 2 hours a day. Thirdly, RuneScape is one of the most popular MMORPG multiplayer game with a large community for which one can play with their friends and able to meet new friends worldwide through chat interface. RuneScape have players from more than 150 countries, with OSRS having an active player base of between 70 to 130,000 a day, while RS3 having about 20 to 50,000 a day. At the bottom of the iceberg, firstly, RuneScape has a skew towards male players, with females being the minorities, as video games generally target male audiences. This might potentially reflect gender inequality in the UK, example, work options and pay. Secondly, through research, I realized that people in the UK who played RuneScape for such a long time, typically 2 to 5 hours per day, were because they spent all their leisure time on RuneScape. It was also found that the target audience was more towards younger players of about 16 years old, thus having more time to play compared to adults. Thirdly, RuneScape is a multiplayer game and it has a stronger community after about 20 years because there were in-game chat functions, guilds, and a web page where there are updates of RuneScape. RuneScape is not an on-your-own game but promotes the idea to work together. In RuneScape, one can make friends, compete, and play with each other.
In America, one of the earliest forms of role-playing games would be Dungeons and Dragons, which is regarded as the all-father of all role-playing games that we know today. Published in 1974, it was a tabletop role-playing game where users would engage in role-playing using the physical playing sets. It would become the foundation upon which many successful titles will be based upon, such as EverQuest, Warcraft, and subsequently World of Warcraft. Now I will be talking about diffusion. There is stimulus diffusion present. Popular games today, such as World of Warcraft, were inspired by popular RPGs of the past, such as Dungeons and Dragons and EverQuest, where the concepts and systems of these previous titles were improved upon and used to make modern RPGs that we now enjoy. One such example would be the death penalty system in EverQuest being adapted in World of Warcraft to be less frustrating for players. Next, I will be talking about acculturation, where integration acculturation is present. Many concepts and ideas from other MMORPGs in the past were improved upon and combined to form the various complex systems and concepts. For example, now instead of having to use a physical set to play RPGs such as Dungeons and Dragons, consumers can now use a computer to play a wide variety of RPGs such as World of Warcraft, online with other users from all over the world. World of Warcraft, one of the most popular RPGs in America since its conception and the top of the iceberg. To start, I'll be talking about the playing hours. Most players who play World of Warcraft play for about 30 hours a week, or on average 4.2 hours a day. Next, gender. Most players of WoW are male, 58.53% as compared to the 36.31% of the player base, which are females, and the remaining being unknown. Lastly, I'll be talking about the community. As World of Warcraft is a multiplayer game, there are various communication channels in the game and outside of it, such as guild chats, forums, and websites. Bottom of the iceberg. Majority of the players that play for 30 hours a week are usually between ages 20 to 25. These are the people with the most free time, as they are young adults that have just graduated from school and have more free time compared to the older people who have more responsibilities in life, or younger people who are preoccupied with their education. World of Warcraft offers a wide plethora of characters to choose from and has no inherent bias to any particular gender, as there are many male and female characters available for people to pick and play as, which also explains why there is not too much of a difference between the male and female population that is playing World of Warcraft. Since World of Warcraft is a multiplayer game, it is important to note that teamwork is an essential part of the game, and as such, communication channels are necessary to allow players from all over the world to connect and foster a community based on a common interest, which in this case is World of Warcraft.
When comparing subtopics with one another, I realized that games such as RuneScape and World of Warcraft are catered towards an extroverted and very outgoing community, while Pokemon, on the other hand, caters towards a more reserved and introverted group of people. For RPG games catering towards England and the USA, there's a major importance placed on interpersonal and communication skills. Having the right connections and background can easily turn something difficult into something manageable. Lastly, having a better overall team performance is more important than individual performance. For significance to future work life, both England and USA share very similar traits. People there tend to be more outgoing and extroverted, thus requiring you to be able to manage and work well with such personalities. Sharing your opinions openly during meetings is an important point, especially in such countries, as other people would not take note of your opinions seriously unless expressed openly and daringly. Lastly, taking time outside of work to get to know your colleagues is a great way to improve communications with your colleagues in England and USA. As people who put great importance in leisure time and relationships, planning lunches with them outside of work can easily improve understanding between you and your colleagues. It might even make you a couple new friends. In Japan, however, it is a different story. People there have an almost polar opposite personality compared to England and the USA, being more introverted and reserved. Thus, you must be able to communicate and work well with this personality. You must be considerate and understanding towards them, as it is a key method of communication with the Japanese people. Without these two principles, you might appear fierce and mean towards them, affecting your ability to communicate with them. Doubts and clarifications in meetings should be done after it and privately. Due to the reserved nature, communicating one-on-one with them puts them in a more comfortable position to answer your inquiries. Efficiency is also important in this case, as Japanese people are always in a hurry to complete their work and tasks. Thus, you must make sure that you're not taking too much time until it affects the schedule.